Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I'm recording yet another update about the situation here in Ukraine as we are undergoing this terrible war and this terrible humanitarian crisis. It's day 17, which is both kind of good sign because we are still holding fast and resisting to the Ukrainian army, and a sad sign because obviously the war is going on already for 17 days with all the casualties, with all innocent victims, and their number just increasing and increasing. We have been given reports over the past days that over 2 million, some quote even the number of 2.5 million Ukrainian refugees have relocated from the intensive fighting zones into Western Ukraine and further into the EU countries, starting with bordering countries, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. So the situation is certainly not getting any better here. And I will tell you in a few slides all the updates that happened during the past 2 days. By the way, I am not able to record these videos daily sometimes, so if I skip a day, please don't be worried immediately about myself or my family or the city of Lviv. It doesn't mean that we are affected by any immediate dangers of the war. It just means that probably I have been busy with something else because the life is going on, and even there are talks about us returning to some routine work duties and children going back to schools, although not physically in distance learning format as during the COVID times. But so far it did not happen. We don't know what will be exact model for the next working week. It will all depend on the developments both in the front lines and behind the front lines, as Russians have intensified the air raids into Ukraine, into the territory of Ukraine that is not affected immediately by the fighting. So in the last few days there were bombings and hits of rockets in Western Ukraine. So what I'm going to reflect in this video, there will be 4 points. The situation here in Western Ukraine, the situation on the front lines. I will speak generally about humanitarian crisis and the refugees, what's going on that front, and also about something very important, I think, in this context, about the situation of the churches in Ukraine, and especially the position of the Russian Orthodox Church in this conflict, because it's actually very much connected with the nature of the war, of what is happening. First of all, about the situation here in Western Ukraine. It seems that we are getting more and more into dangerous phase here. In the first days of the war, we were obviously scared, and there were the sirens wailing all the time, and we had to go into hiding 5 times, 7 times a day. But except for one case, there were no direct rocket targets here in Western Ukraine, except for one in the first day of the war, the airfield in the city of Ivano-Frankivsk, which is 100 kilometers from where I am, was hit. But that was not very bloody episode. I think no one died. There were just destructions of technical buildings. But unfortunately, yesterday we woke up with the sirens again at about 5 o'clock that sounded in Lviv and in all Western Ukrainian cities. And there were heavy hits in the city of Lutsk, which is again 100 kilometers north of Lviv, closer to Belarusian border. The airport there was hit by rockets, and several soldiers died. because this was a military airfield, and the barracks of the soldiers were hit, and the technical infrastructure was destroyed. The same goes for another city that as yet has not been affected by war directly, had not been affected by yesterday, city of Dnipro, in just on the left bank of the river Dnieper in the center of the country, and the city is known for its industry, and some industrial and military objects there were hit with Russian rockets early morning yesterday. We were expecting a very rough night today because of the threats of direct invasion from the territory of Belarus. Thanks to God, it did not happen so far, although there is more and more pressure evidently put by Putin on the dictator of Belarus, Lukashenko, to advance into Ukraine with 30,000 troops that he has at his own disposal. This would be extremely harmful for the situation on the front lines, because another 30,000 legion, so to speak, advanced into Ukraine would be quite bad for the balance of the force. On the other hand, it's just very difficult to imagine Belarusian troops invading Ukraine, because notwithstanding that Lukashenko is under the umbrella of Putin for the time being, he is really dependent on Putin politically, because he has lost all his legitimacy with his own people and with European community whatsoever. So he is dependent on Russia's own dictator, Putin. But Belarusian people are very peaceful people, and their troops are, I don't want to say weak, but they have never been in any real battle, and they are certainly at the grassroots level, they are absolutely unwilling to fight in Ukraine. They have nothing of this Russian type of mindset that they have to conquer Ukraine or anything. So far, they are resisting and not taking part in this Putin's aggressive war. But the situation can change, and it's very worrisome, because if it does, then we have plus 30,000 people more to fight, and also there will be much more intensive shelling and bombardments from the territory of Belarus, which is already happening, but not at so large scale. And there will be certainly direct danger to western Ukraine, because from the territory of Belarus it's much easier to sneak into Lutsk region and then into Lviv region all the way to Polish border. We hope it doesn't happen. As for the general situation in the front lines, it's kind of stalemate at the moment. There is a very intensive fighting going on. It's not like a passive stalemate. No, there are all efforts made by Russian troops to advance to Kyiv, to take over the southern city of Mariupol that is turned into rubbles and faces terrible humanitarian catastrophe, being encircled by Russian troops. Something like 1,600 civilian bodies are already reported as casualties of this direct shellings by Russian troops, shellings of residential quarters. Many people died of other causes like dehydration, maybe not starvation, but different deprivation of basic needs. And it's also cold there, so it's extremely difficult, and so far Russians were not allowing civilians to leave the heavy fighting zone, so they are trapped there, and as I said, 1,600 officially reported dead, with the number that is certainly not final, because there are so many bodies still on the streets, in the basements, or under the rubbles of the buildings that fell down, and those bodies to be recovered, it will take days and maybe weeks in some cases after the fighting finishes. So far it's far from finished. So there is advancement in the South Ukraine, probably the only successful, relatively successful, but very minimal advancement of Russian troops. In other directions, they are still being held on the front lines by Ukrainian troops, with more and more casualties obviously from both sides, but Russian troops incur extremely heavy losses, unheard of in the military history of Russia after the World War II. So for the front lines, there are also nice pictures. The life goes on, and I was just struck by this picture I saw on the internet of a young couple, two soldiers getting married, receiving the blessing of a chaplain. And what's striking in this picture is that instead of traditional crowns or wreath of flowers that is held normally in the church ceremony, you see these helmets being held over their heads, which is, I think, extremely remarkable given the situation. Humanitarian crisis. There are millions of refugees, as I said. People travel by cars, by buses. Luckily, the train connection is not destroyed. The railroad all the way from Kharkiv in the extreme east, north of Ukraine, to Lviv is so far intact, and people are being jammed into railroad cars and sleep on the corridor. As you can see, I was personally told by some people arriving here in Lviv that they were jammed, like 15 people in a small compartment for 4 people. So they had to travel standing upright for 18 hours, which is obviously unbearable experience. Regarding the position of the church, it was something extremely painful last week, because, as you probably know, in the Eastern Rite here, in the Eastern Rite churches, we just started Lent. So it was the Sunday before Lent, last Sunday, and the Patriarch of Moscow pronounced his homily in Moscow, basically supporting the war, explicitly supporting the war in Ukraine, and claiming it to be in defense of the Russian world and in defense of Russian nation, and basically gave his blessing for the military aggression against Ukraine, obviously leaving aside the question of civilian casualties. And I don't even like the word casualties, because casualty means something that happens not on purpose, unintentionally. And what we are seeing is real acts of genocide, because if you shell residential quarters with ballistic rockets and bombard them during the night without any prior warning, and civilians die in hundreds at minimum from bombardments, and you don't allow corridor for civilians to leave, this is not casual. This is not something that happens just as collateral damage to the fighting. It's genocide. It's destruction of people's lives on purpose, and that's what's happening. And unfortunately, we have been I don't want to say disappointed, because we didn't actually expect Russian Orthodox Church to oppose Putin's policy, but we were still shocked with the way it is supported. To be fair, there were several, I mean, like up to 200 priests who signed a petition, ordinary Russian Orthodox priests, no one bishop among them, out of hundreds of bishops in Russia. So there were like 200 something the last time I checked, priests who signed anti-war petition. That's it. There is no official, there is no high-level condemnation of this, and there is no really even mild statements that they would say, okay, the war is just, we support Putin, but please spare civilians, please offer the corridor for people of Mariupol or Kharkiv to leave. No, it's absolutely deaf. I don't see, I don't hear, I don't say anything. That's the policy of the Russian Orthodox Church, which actually calls for re-evaluation of this church, whether it's actually deserves the name of the Christian church. As you know, what is going on in Ukraine is the campaign of denazification, something supposedly directed against Nazis that took power in Ukraine, which is obviously rubbish. But some Russian Orthodox priests actually yesterday published a couple of pictures of Moscow Patriarch greeting a leader of actual alt-right, openly Nazi movement in Russia, that this guy in the red shirt, who is serving Russian Orthodox Church as a kind of paramilitary wing. So whenever they need a fist to fight someone in Russia, these guys serve Patriarch. And there are a number of pictures all over internet of these Orthodox paratroopers that have, as you could see from the previous picture, direct blessing and support of the Moscow Patriarchate. Unfortunately, that's what we are dealing with here. It's completely Orwellian. The fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists. That's what we are facing. Thank you very much for watching, and please support Ukraine with your prayer, with your action, political action in your countries, and with your donations if you can. Thank you very much.